Welcome, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inspire SA. I have to say, there's quite some new looks here and there, but we're going through some major changes on behalf of the Inspire SA team and what we're all about and everything. But we'll announce it with due time. So, without wasting any further of time, today we have a four-part series. It's the beginning of a four-part series on learning how to code in Python. And our host or our speaker who will be taking us through our series is none other than Koketso. While he's coming on board, this is his first episode as a gold ambassador. So I'm gonna congratulate him live on the show. So without any further time, welcome, Mr. Gold.
How you doing? How you doing, man? Are you well?
Yes, I'm well. I'm okay. I'm doing okay, and you?
I'm better days, better days. You can see, we've got load shedding, on my side, so we're just doing the best that we can. So hopefully,
Mm,
yeah, the session, I mean, I really like doing these series with the Microsoft Inspire team. It's quite interesting. People get to learn quite a lot. I get to actually, share my experience and so forth. But yeah, thank you so much for the congratulations. I mean, you beat me to it, so
I know it's not a race, bro. I mean, it's we're all in the running a marathon, and we all want each other to be
yeah,
at the same level. So yeah,
yeah,
congrats once
most
more.
definitely, definitely. Thank you so much, man.
So what are we doing?
All right, so basically, what I'm going to be, teaching you guys is basically coding in Python like a pro. So, what does a pro actually mean? Is that I'm going to be showing you what you actually really need to know for you to actually start building real world projects. Now, I know every single developer and everyone always says, "How do I, actually start or go about developing these projects?" And this is where I am going to literally show you. I mean, obviously I'm going to give you guys tasks and homework and research that you guys can do because we only have a 4-part series and I can't cover 17 years of experience into like 4 hours, right? So this this series, is just going to literally show you, highlight, and actually emphasize on the most important things that you guys really need to know for you to become an ultimate Python developer, right? So I'm going to be also talking about Python and Django simultaneously. Now, a lot of people say that you need to learn Python first and you have to learn Django, but as I said, these are just opening tools that you guys can obviously get a grasp on, and you guys can obviously dive deep, right? So yeah, that's basically what we are going to be working on for the next 4 weeks.
Sounds very fascinating. I have to say. For me, I'm like a novice Python user. I prefer the C languages, the .NET ecosystem, but Python is also up there as one of my favorites. So I'm looking forward to see what you have in store for us, and with regards also to our viewers watching as well.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, this program is definitely for beginners. So even if you've never seen a line of code, touched a line of code, this series is definitely for you because I am literally going to be showing you, from A all the way to Z and actually help you build your first project in Python and in Django. So by the time 4 weeks comes, you'll be so confident enough to actually start building project on your own. So stick around, guys. Stick around. There's gonna be lots of learning. Take out your pen, take out your pads, your laptops. There's gonna be a lot of learning that you're gonna be doing.
Sure, kick us away. Take it away.
Awesome stuff. So, how I actually structure my lessons is that there's going to be a first session where I will deconstruct and talk about the theory side of things, and then I move on to the practical sessions where I actually work on code with you guys. All right. So, just let me know if you guys can actually see my screen.
Okay, you can share your screen. You sharing your screen?
Yeah, I'm just getting my presentation ready. You just let me know.
Okay. Okay, there's it popped up.
All right. So, without further ado, let me just quickly introduce myself and this whole series. So, this series basically it's all about the introduction to Python and Django for developers. Now, my name is Koketsu Mutsutada, also known as CapFresh. I also am a CEO and a founder of a startup called Billionaire Developers, where we help newbies, novices, to come into the coding world, and we teach them how to code in Python. Right. So this is a series, four-part series, where I'm going to be teaching you guys everything that you guys need to know about becoming a Python and Django developer, right? So let's look at the agenda for today. So first of all, we're going to be doing the introductions. I'll be talking about what exactly is Python and what is Django, how to install Python in Django, as well as knowing the basics. So the basics cover things like the syntax. We'll be talking about something called virtual environments, variables, iterations, conditions, functions, methods, as well as talking about the Django architecture, which is called the MVT, classes, and objects. But without further ado, you're probably asking yourself, who is this guy? My name is Koketsu Mototata. I have been a developer for almost all of my life, and I have been, working with multiple of organizations and companies such as Microsoft, Google, AWS. I also am a mentor, a coach, and I also just, promote um, code ethics and so forth and so on. But this is definitely not about me, right? So it's all about you. So let's dive deep into learning everything that we need to know about Python and Django. So you're probably asking yourself, what is this Python thing that I keep talking about, right? So as a beginner, you probably are tuned in because you are curious and wondering what is this term that I keep talking about called Python programming, right? So basically, Python programming is considered to be one of the best and the fastest growing programming languages. So programming languages basically it is a tool that actually helps us to create software, right? So it helps us to create programs that we actually, us as developers, type in, and we create software, right? So whether it be websites, it be applications, it be all sorts of things, you can name it, right? So but Python is actually it's an object-oriented programming language, which is a very key element that I'm going to be touching on within the weeks and explaining the whole concept, right? But basically, Python is very simple to use, has a very easy syntax to learn, and you will see also it is quite also easy to use in terms of coding, right? Then again, what is Django, right? So Django, once again, it's just a framework that allows you to build websites, right? So what I mean a website is, as you type into www.google, that actually helps the Django actually helps you to host your website and actually be displayed onto the website, onto the internet. So Django, obviously, you have to, is heavily built on Python, so that's why it's quite important for you to actually know the Python language pretty well for you to actually understand what Django is all about. But as I said, I will be talking more about Python and Django as the weeks and times go. So if you guys are not familiar with to guys get these started, these are the URLs. I'll also pop it in the chat for later on when we move on to the practical sessions. So that you guys make sure that you guys please download Python and make sure that you guys um, open up the Django documentation, because with Python you need to download it, but Django is actually an extension. It's more of an extension that we have to actually import or actually install as a package. Right. So, what is syntax? Right. So, syntax basically is it's just a way of a set of rules or definitive instructions of how a Python program should be written, right? Or actually, and also being interpreted. So, certain languages have certain syntax. So, syntax just basically means just the rules of how you can actually use Python, right? So every programming language has syntax. So if you are familiar with Java or C++, you will know that those two have their different syntaxes as well as Python. So for a simple example, if I just want to print a simple hello world, the syntax would just be using print and hello world. So now the word print is actually a built-in function in Python that we use just to display things. All right. Uh, Hello, hello, hello.
Technology.
Am I still audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Oh,
Audible. Yeah. It sounded like something fell.
oh yeah. Let me just adjust. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I can still see you.
All right. So let me just carry on. Actually, let me just try to do this for now. All right. So I think let me just carry on like this for now. So and let me just carry on my presentation. All right. All right. So let's talk about. Okay. So as I actually explained what syntax is all about, and basically it's just a set of rules of how we actually we use Python in terms of its rules and definitions, right? Another thing that's quite important is something called a virtual environment, right? So this is quite a very important topic that I really want you guys to also understand because during your Python career as a whole, you'll be exposed to something called the virtual environment, and it is very important that you understand what these environments are all about. So let me give you a typical example where if we have a project and we're working on Python 3.5, right? We're working on a project and all of a sudden there's Python 3.9 or 3.10. Now, obviously, with different versions, they are come with different features. So there might be outdated things that we are using in a project in 3.5, but then we also that don't exist in 3.10. So this is where virtual environments come in. So basically, it is like a container, right? Which actually comprises of all the libraries and the scripts that are actually being used in that specific project in isolation. So we do not have to clash different versions when it comes to different projects. So you will obviously understand this more often once you obviously take your Python career into uh, a much more serious into serious matters, right? So that's obviously the first part of the presentation, where I just wanted to obviously talk about just the basics of what the terminologies are. But the next section that I'm going to be showing you guys is actually the practical sessions. So it's best if I actually show you examples of what exactly these examples are. All right, so let me quickly. All right.
They say the best way to learn is by
Sorry, you were saying?
I'm saying they say the best way to learn is by practicing.
Oh yes, yes, yes,
Practice makes
definitely.
perfect.
All right. So I'm just quickly gonna be opening my terminal real quick.
So while you're opening a terminal, what is a terminal like? Some big words, or people may be confused. What is a terminal?
Oh, all right. So a terminal basically it is a place where you can actually write your code, right? So think about it like a pen and paper, right? Where if you want to write a letter, you actually use pen and paper. But also you can use something called an email, right? So obviously providers like Microsoft Outlook provide you a platform for you to actually write your email. So similar to us when we actually want to write code, we use something called a terminal, right? So now with the terminal, there's something called an IDE. An IDE actually is the platform that actually provides. So for a perfect example is actually Microsoft Visual Studio Code, which obviously is one of the most popular IDEs. I use it personally. I highly recommend it. But as I said, as time goes on, we're going to be using VS Code, but you're more than welcome to use things like Sublime Text. You can use Bracket. You can use all IDEs as long as it actually supports Python, which is in a very efficient way. So I'm just going to be using the typical IDLE that comes with Python, right? So just let me know if you guys can see my screen again.
It's loading. When you said the word terminal, it sounds like we're going in through a movie or space-time travel in a terminal. It's, okay,
Okay,
now it's
so
loaded.
All right, cool. So you guys are probably seeing like this white screen that's gonna be happening. And guys, as I said, don't worry too much about how to set up everything else because I will be showing you guys how to set up all of this. I just really want you guys to really understand and grasp the concept that I will be teaching you guys, right? So the first things first is that I want to talk about something called can you guys actually see my screen? Is it fine?
It's visible, but can you please zoom in a bit? Control plus plus, if I'm not mistaken.
So here it's we actually don't use um we have to use the magnifier. Is it much better now?
A bit more, please.
Are you able to see it now?
Um, Last a bit more, just a little bit more.
Okay, just a little bit more. Let's see. Uh, uh,
I think that is enough.
right here.
Yeah, enough. Yeah, it's
Okay,
enough.
phew, it's so huge on my side. All right. So there's a few things that I want to actually just cover real quick. And I think because of my power situation, it's just making things a bit more difficult. Right. So I'm going to talk about what comments are. Talking about what are variables. I'm going to be talking about data types. I want to be talking about conditions and iterations. And then I want to talk about um, functions and methods. And then lastly, I want to talk about classes and objects. Right. So obviously, guys, if you're not quite sure about what are these terminologies are, these are just bullet points in terms of as I will be explaining to you guys what are these. All right. So just so Python actually, if you want to do something like a comment, so comment basically it is something that um, actually helps you to make notes on your code. Right. So the reason why you actually want to use comments is because if you're working in a team of developers, right, and you are working on a piece of code, you want to be able to leave comments onto your code that is going to actually help the following developer to understand what you're trying to do. Even for yourself, because you might be working on a project and then you leave it there for 6 months and you come back and you try to work on it, you might have forgotten what you are trying to do or what certain functions or certain things are doing inside of your code, right? So that's why it's quite important for you to know what are comments, right? So now that we know what are comments, let's move on to variables. So what is a variable? So variables are basically a containers that actually hold information. So it's simply containers that hold information. So you're asking yourself, what kind of information can I actually store in a variable? So a typical example of how a variable would be, let's say I want to describe a person. So usually a person would have a first name, right? And let's say this person's name is just John, right? And second, you would say, okay, well, they obviously have a surname, and the surname can actually be, let's say, it's gonna be Doe, right? And let's say this person has an age, and this age is 16 years old. Now, as you guys can see, I have two different types of variables here. In Python, this is how you actually declare a variable. You don't actually have to specify to say that this is a string or this is a integer, this is a boolean, this is whatever. With Python, you can actually give your variables um, assignment values on the fly, right? So our guys can, but the difference is this is what we call a string and this is what we call an integer, right? So obviously integer being numbers, string being words or characters. Okay. Now in Python, it's as you guys can see, I have an underscore. But if I had to do something like this, Python is actually going to give me an error because it's going to read this as two different things and it doesn't even know what this is. So we have to use something called an underscore, or we can use something called a camel case, right? So something that looks like this. So this is actually snake case, and you can actually do it like this. So this is actually how you actually define a variable, and variables can be a lot of things. Let's say we have something like an address, right? So an address can be something like number 77, Liquorway Street, right? So as you guys can see, so you can actually assign a variable with any data type. So now you're asking yourself, what exactly is a data type, right? So data types that we actually get in Python are just basically the types of information that we deal with, right? So it's the type of information we work with, right? So one of the popular data types, what that you'll obviously get is an integer, right? Which is written like this. And this is an example of an integer would be, let's say, 83, right? Then another data type that you actually get is called a string, which is written like this. And a string obviously has double quotation marks and it's something like that. Another data type that we always tend to use is called a double, right? So a double is something that's like 27.46. We have something called float, right? So a float would actually be something like the value of pi. So that would be 3.14, yada, 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 as you guys can see, and you guys can take the point. But these are typically the most common data types that we actually use when it comes to the Python language. So now you're asking yourself, okay, so what's the point of me actually knowing data types and variables all at the same time, right? So for instance, if I then want to say I want to create a program that says, okay, I want to store, or obviously, as I said, variables, you store information. So the biggest advantage of variables is that you don't always have to call out that name every single time, right? So for instance, if I had to show you something like this, I say print, um, my name is, and I just say, yes, name, and I say it's the five. So if I want to run my program, where is it? All right, let me just close this and I'll press F5. All right, as you guys can see, it says my name is John, and as you guys can see over here, that's exactly what I actually wrote. Right? Yeah. Right. So my name is John, and obviously we gave our first name as a John. So now, as your program grows and progresses, what if we want to change the first name, right? So we don't always have to input the name John every single time in our program. Because imagine if we had 30 lines of code and we actually need to change this value, right? Or we can have something like uh, my age is, and then what you do is you can just simply um, age. So now, guys, as you guys can see, I'm using this plus operation. So this is what we call something called concatenating, right? So I'm meaning I'm joining two things at the same time. right? So this is, I'm dynamically typing this in, and obviously, guys, as I said, print is a built-in function in Python that actually helps us to display information onto our terminal. So if I press F5 and I press OK, you will then see. Oh, okay. I have to actually convert this into a string. I have to actually convert this into a string. Right. Right. So, okay, cool. So as you guys can see, my name is John and my age is 16, which is perfectly well there. So now the reason why you asking me about I need to convert this into a string is because the print function can only identify strings, right? Because obviously it's a print function. So whenever you are dealing with numbers, you will see quite this a lot. We might have to actually convert things to strings, convert things into integers, and that's why Python is quite popular and quite um, powerful in that sense that you don't actually have to do so much converting from an integer to a string, and vice versa. Right. So I hope you guys actually are getting the basic understanding of what a variable is. Because even if I had to change the name John and I say Mike, and Mike is not 16, but he is 55, and I press F and I run my program, you will now see that now my values have changed. So you see that's the reason why we actually have variables is that we actually define our variables once, and the only thing we have to do is just call my function or call my variable once. And no matter how long and how big my program is, and let's say I just need to change my program, and um, I will not have to go every single line to change it dynamically because I can just go there once and change it into variables. Right. So I hope you guys actually understand that this is where variables and variables are quite powerful, and you guys will see it as you guys learn. Especially if you're from a programming background, you know that variables are quite an important concept that you actually need to master. Right. So I spoke about variables and I spoke about data types. So as you can see, I've worked with strings, I've worked with doubles, I've worked with integers, and I've worked with floats. Right. So even if I do say things like um, um, my mark average is, and what I can just simply do is concatenate that. Now remember, when you print, it always takes a string. So in here, because I want to print my double, and I'm using um, the address. So let's just say I stay at. So because this is a string, we don't actually need to convert that. All we have to do is we simply call the address. I press it, I run my program. I say yes, and you will see there it is. All right. So Mike is 55 and he stays over there. All right. So it's quite cool to actually see that, slowly but surely you are actually understanding how to use variables and different data types. All right. So moving swiftly right along, let me just close this. All right. So we are done with variables. We've done with data types. And we've done with comments. So I can actually move this all out here. So now let's talk about conditions and iterations. Now, what are conditions and iterations? So you have something called a for loop, right? You have an if statement. You have a while loop, and yeah, I think for now we can
Okay,
use.
so
Yes.
I'm gonna have to stop you there. We have a question from Wyatt Martin.
All
Um,
right.
is asking, is it not an issue if you change later? Is it not an issue if you later change age to something that's not a number?
So what would it be? So, for
Sorry?
instance, so I'm trying to understand the question. Like, if you want to change age into something else, what else would we be changing that to?
So he's asking, right, from what I'm getting as well, is that if you want to change the value of age as you go through the code or throughout the program, uh,
Hmm.
if I put it as a string, if I put something a string inside age, will it cause an error or what? I think that's what he's asking.
Okay, so it won't cause an error because remember that Python will then see that as a string instead of an integer. So, for instance, let's say remember we had age was equal to 16, and
He
let's say
gave
I
an
now change.
example.
Okay,
Age is equal to happy birthday.
so something like that.
Yeah. So he's asking
All
if
right.
if he does something like this, will it cause an error?
Okay, so it will cause an error, but if you put quotation marks inside of it, the only thing is that happy birthday just has a variable name called age. But it's not really advisable to think about those kind of things because you want to make sure that your coding is precise and it actually makes logical sense. So if I look at age and I see happy birthday, already I'm thinking that it doesn't really make logical sense, whereas I could say date of birth equals happy birthday.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I see.
So I mean logically it's right, but I'm as a programmer, you don't want to think that way, where you can just.
So okay. What you just assigned it to? Is that what
Sorry,
you're
I think
getting
you
to?
were. I think you were breaking there for a second.
Yes, I'm saying that what you're getting to is that Python automatically assigns the variable to what you set it to. So you set it to
Yes,
a
that's
string,
correct.
age will now
Yes,
automatically become a string.
that's correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Yeah. All right. So hopefully,
We may
hopefully,
carry on. That was the only question we had.
all right. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. So we have statements. All right. Cool. So what is a for loop? Right. So for loop actually helps us to iterate through items. Right. So, for example of a for loop, so for instance, let's say I have a list of items, right? So I've got a list of items, right? Items, and this is actually how you write lists in Python. So let's say I've got let me see, let me say A, I've got B, I've got C, and I've got um, let's see, Z, right? I've got a list of items, and I mean this list can be extremely long. Let's say you've got hundreds and thousands of items in the list. So now you want to ask yourself, all right, so now I want to actually iterate. I want to go through this list, right? So let's say we've got a thousand items in this list, right? So now what we need to do is something called a for loop, and we actually need to go through each and every item within the element, right? So we simply say something called a for. So for is a keyword in Python and most programming languages. So we need to obviously assign some sort of an index or a placeholder, right? It can be anything. It could be index, it could be Z, it could be A, it could be whatever, right? For Z in, and you obviously, what are we iterating in? We're iterating in the list items, right? And now this is where another syntax, a Python comes with syntax. Most programming languages, you'd actually have something called curly braces or something like that. But with Python, all we have to do is have a semicolon, a colon, and press enter. And you guys will already see there's already an indentation. So in most programming languages, as I said, you'd have something that looks like that, right? Where you actually would write your code inside over here. But luckily for us with Python, we don't actually have to worry about all of that stuff. The only thing we have to do is just minding that as long as our our cursor is actually indented, right? So for that, let's say I just simply want to print each and every element inside of my list. And if I press that and I run my program, you guys can see that it's got A, B, C, and Z, right? So that's another thing. So now let's say, for instance, you want to actually find the total length of the list, right? You don't know how long this length is. Python has another keyword called length, right? And this is actually going to give us the length value. And if I press F5, run my program, and it will give us um, oh, okay. So I'm using strings. It's obviously going to give me ones and zeros. But if I had to change, for instance, how can I manipulate this? Okay, so let's change my list items to numbers now. Let me say 1, 2, 3, and if I print list items once again, it should give us exactly the same thing, right? So that's the reason why for loops are actually quite important. It's because it just helps us to iterate through um, list items, right? So okay, let me close that. Okay, cool. So we understand what for loops are meant for doing, just for simply iterating. And guys, you can also have multiple for loops, right? So for instance, if you had um, lists items, let me say 2, let me say something like that. I wonder if this is actually going to work. So for that, you can also have a for and C in list underscore items 2. What do I want to do? I want to print. Um, let's see if this is going to work. C and E. Okay, so I made a syntax error. Oh, I made an error. Okay, so for. Okay, let me just do this. Okay, so for C in. Run that. All right, you guys can see that. Right, so there are my values and they are printing, as you guys can see. So it's actually iterating through the list twice, right? So as you guys can see, for loops are just basically meant for you just to go through items, go through lists, or pick up things if they're using a list. Now, lists are quite important, and list obviously goes with things like tuples, and so forth. So that's also something that I'm going to be covering, within the weeks. But as I said, I just want you actually guys to actually understand how we can start working and manipulating with code. All right. So hopefully this is also making sense that for loops is simply you are iterating through items, and that's about it. It could be integers, it could be strings, it could be anything else, right? And you just want to make sure that you want to try to display information from that. Okay. So we're done with that. Now, the next one I want to talk about is if statements, right? So, if statements are more conditionals, right? So, an if statement is conditionals, the condition, right? So, an example of a condition is that if it's not left, it is right. If it's not up, it is down. If it's back, it is forth. Usually, conditions like it has to have some sort of other operating answer, right? So, if it's not A, it's B. If it's not B, it's C. If it's not C, it's D, right? So, think of a multiple choice question, right? So, think of a multiple choice question, right? So in multiple choice questions, what we usually have is if so you have option A, you have option B, you have option C, you have option D. Actually, let's just keep it to A, B, and C, right? So let's just say if it is not A, then it has to be B, or if it's not B, then it has to be C, right? So let me just, so this is just shorthand code. This is not actually me coding, but it's making sure that you guys actually understand the logic, right? So if the answer obviously is not A, if the answer is not B, it has to be C, right? So if the answer is A, it cannot be C and it cannot be B as well. So this is where conditions happen, right? So you have to make sure that you have a definite answer or not, right? So as I said, let's think about this multiple choice question, right? So if I have an, let's say I have a mark, right? And let's say this is my average mark for the year. And let's say I did really well and I got 78%, right? So I don't have to, this is just an example. This is not really, so as you guys can see, I'm using a variable, right? So now I want to actually check to see that did I pass, did I get a distinction, or did I fail, right? So let's now look at our conditions. If I then say that if I passed, right, a pass is basically anything that is equals to or more, equal or more than, let's say, 50, right? Then we can say a distinction is anything that is 75 that's equal to or more than 75, right? And obviously a fail would be, let's say, obviously it's anything that is not, but it's actually anything that is less than 49. Actually, it should be actually equals to, it should be equals or less than 49. All right. So logically, this makes sense, right? So anything from 0 to 49 is a fail. Anything from 50 to 74 is a pass. And anything from 75 to 100 is distinction, right? So now how do we now put this in terms of code? Now, if I obviously have to say if mark is so we take the first condition, right? So we can obviously then say that, okay, let's actually start with the lowest one. If we let's look at the fail one. If mark is actually, we did say it's less less than 49, right? What do I then need to say? I can just simply print something that says sorry, you have failed, right? So if I don't have that, what else can I then do? I can then say else. I can also just say if arc is now equals to and greater than, greater than 50, and mark is also equals to and less than 70, what is it, 74, you can just simply print and say, well done. Okay, well, we'll say yes. You have passed. And then last but not least, so now this is where the else method comes, where it's the last condition that you'll be having. That's the last case, right? So if I didn't fail, if I didn't pass, obviously then it means I have a distinction, right? So else, you can just say else, simply print you are a star, right? So let me just check if my whole program is running. Let's press F5. Let's fix it. Okay, so the syntax error. Where is that?
Is it okay if I say if else time is greater than 45 episode long?
Sorry, please repeat that again.
Is it okay if I say if episode is greater than 45 minutes, episode long?
Sorry, man.
You understand?
I think I'm breaking.
I
Uh,
said, is it okay? Is it okay if we say if episode greater than 45 minutes, print episode long?
oh yeah, yeah. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. All right. So let's see. Okay, wait. Sorry, you have failed. Why? Is it because less than 45? Let's see, change my mark. Okay, so you are a star. So this actually works, right, guys? Because why? When you look at my mark actually is more than 75, 78, right? So what did we actually look at our condition? Our condition tells us, okay, 78 is more than 50. I've definitely passed. 78 is more than 75. I've definitely got a distinction. So that actually means that I am a star, right? And as you guys can see, where is my, can we just run it again? And as you guys can see, it definitely says I am a star. Right. So this is what conditionals are all about. It's all about, if it's not this, it has to be that. If it's not this, it has to be that. And you can also have multiple conditions, right? If I'm not in grade one, I'm in grade two, I'm in grade three, I'm in grade four, and so forth and so forth, right? So I hope you guys are slowly understanding how these are gonna be working. And guys, as I said, with practice, you definitely understand. This is definitely, I mean, it's the first time we're working with Python, first time you're hearing all of these terminologies and all of these breakdown tools. And I'm actually giving you practical examples. So I hope you guys are not getting lost, but more of understanding, not focusing too much on the code. And even when you're looking at the Python code, it literally has one, two, three, four, five, 6 lines of code. And you can already check that we're already building programs, right? So I hope you guys now understand that we've covered variables, we've covered if statements, we've just covered for loops, right? So we also have another kind of a loop, which is a while loop. But I think because of time, let me
Yes.
just how am I looking now? How am I looking? How many? Okay, so it
We're on
looks like I just
overtime now.
all right. So it looks like we are on overtime. So this is where I will stop for now. And for next week, what I'm actually gonna do, we're gonna actually jump into Django and actually start setting up our projects and how to actually work. So next week, guys, make sure that obviously you've downloaded VS Code. I will also we'll drop the link into the chat right now, or obviously it's just free online. Just go onto Google Chrome, www.vscode for free, either for Windows or Mac, and obviously, but please make sure that you've got Python installed, and yeah, you've got VS Code, and then we'll pick it up from next week. Other than that, it's been great, it's been good, and yeah, I mean, obviously, I think maybe just if there's any more questions, I am willing to take a few.
There are no questions from what I can see in the chat, but from my point of view, the question that I want to ask is there such thing as a better programming language? Why am I obligated to learn Python or C Sharp or what? Like just for the beginners, these are some of the questions they might be asking themselves just to end
All right. So
today's episode.
to be quite honest, I focus a lot on Python, right? So if you guys can see of obviously the series, I just have a big passion for the Python programming language. Um, to be quite honest, I personally feel that Python is one of the most easiest programming languages that you can actually get into in terms of just learning programming as basics, and also just looking at the trajectory of how programming is moving. I mean, we're looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, web development, and all of these things are heavily based on Python, right? If you're not going to data science, data analytics, it's you're going to go into
Mm.
Python. So literally nowadays, everything that comprises of anything that's
So
digital or anything that's coding
is
well. You were asking,
are you finished? Because
yeah.
looks like the network is starting to kick in now. Okay. No,
All right.
just to sum up everything you just said, it's all a matter of preference, right?
Yeah,
What you prefer and what you need, basically. So
that's
yeah,
correct.
that's
That's
why
correct.
I just wanted to highlight that question. So to just tell the viewers that it's not a matter of which language is the best or which language is better than what language. It's just a matter about what you need, what you're trying to do, and what you are trying to achieve, as Koketo just explained.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very informative session. I'm looking forward for the next 3 sessions for next week, for session 2.
Yeah.
So
I just
to,
hope we
to
don't have power issues again. So, but yeah, we do the best that we can.
if, if only we had ESCOM on speed dial.
Yeah, but that's another story. Um, all right,
Thank
but
you again
thank
for
you so much,
joining,
guys.
guys. Sure.
All right,
Um,
take care.
uh, um, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our videos. And don't forget to tune in next time for another episode of Inspire SA. Thank you once again.
Peace.